It's good to be here today. I wanted to start by looking at something that is unique to your generation. And that is each generation is given a label, some identification. Some of you who might have parents who are in their low to mid-50s would be a part of the tail end of the baby boomer generation. Most of you have parents who are part of Generation X. You all are a part of Generation Y, or given the name the millennials. And there's one aspect of the millennial generation that Professor Coleman and I wanted to focus in on today. And that is the millennials, your generation, is characterized by having a high degree of sophistication and savvy when it comes to media technologies and digital social networking products. No other generation has come along and has had the opportunity to be able to incorporate this kind of technology into their life. Hasn't happened before. And so Professor Coleman and I were thinking about what kind of an impact might this media technology have on the quality of life of your generation. There's lots of other questions we have as well in terms of how that could shape who we are, how it dictates our time, what are some of the positives or perhaps some of the negative outcomes associated with that. And so we began to sit down, and the first thing we talked about was, what do we currently know about this kind of technology? And so we knew that there were reports that it's used quite a bit, that it was popular particularly among college students. And so, for example, we found statistics that showed us, for example, with Facebook, which began in 2004, although it was pretty much just confined to students enrolled at Harvard at that time, that in the years that followed, by 2008, there were over 250,000 new users of Facebook every single day. Okay? By the end of this chapel hour, there'll be 10,000 additional Facebook users. For the first time in history, last month, Facebook incurred more hits than Google. It's never happened before. And so some of this technology that you're quite familiar with has proliferated at a pace that no one ever anticipated. We also knew that students at least appeared to be able to be spending a lot of time using the technology. But we didn't have a lot of data to actually back that up. So a lot of this was just by informally watching behavior, listening to anecdotal reports, and the like. We also suspected that with this technology, there's probably some wonderful positive outcomes associated with it, and we wanted to learn more about that. At the same time, we thought there would probably be some negative outcomes as well. As we began to look for research studies that we could actually trust, valid studies, studies that were done in a good scientific way, that's where we ran into some difficulty. We wanted to get a better handle on you all, college students, specifically Christian college students. We couldn't find any data out there that we could trust. And so this is where we decided to do our own study. And so we put together an electronic questionnaire, distributed using SurveyMonkey. And this survey was set up with the purpose of trying to find out what is being used in terms of electronic media and products out there. What are you using? What's popular? What's in? What's out? And so on. Then how often are you using it? What kind of time commitments are you spending towards that? We also wanted to find out, why were you using it? What advantages and disadvantages What impact was it having on your quality of life? Lots of questions that we wanted answers to, so we were going to try to use this opportunity to find that out. Now, the study, as you heard earlier from Greg, was conducted 1 year ago. It involved a number of Christian college students. We were able to recruit from 4 different campuses. Obviously, one of the campuses was Gordon College. In fact, some of you, if you're a sophomore, junior, or senior, you might have remembered participating in the study yourself. We ended up with 419 from Gordon. In addition to that, we had another group that came from 3 other Christian colleges, and because of confidentiality agreements, I can't tell you who they are. You would recognize their names, I just can't name them. In terms of the demographics of those who were a part of this survey, we see that nearly, we have a 70% female, 30% male. That is quite common among Christian higher education institutions, as you're well familiar with. We have a fairly narrow demographic when it comes to age cohort, which is something we expected. We anticipated this, and kind of a pleasant, unexpected finding was the fact that it just turned out that we had almost equal percentages of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Now, in terms of the results, let's start with looking at what are you actually using. And so we listed all different kinds of media products out there. These were the ones that came up where a higher percentage of you were actually using these. So you can see that Facebook is way up there. In fact, if you look at that, there's only a very small percentage of you that actually has not used that particular single technology. So when it comes to asking questions about have you used some of the electronic technology available to you, it's nearly 100%. In addition, since we conducted this survey 12 months ago, things have radically changed. Within the past 12 months, Twitter accounts have gone up 8-fold. There are now 14.5 million users of Twitter alone. So even within this short time span of last spring to this spring, it's the technology, the landscape of what's being used out there is completely changed. Now, in looking at daily uses, one thing that I want you to notice here is that this is only for Facebook on this slide. So this does not include text messaging, email, talking on the phone, YouTube, any other electronic gaming, any of those. And so one thing to point out, just to look at more precision with the numbers, that right away you see that there's at least somewhere around 15% that might be regarded as very high impact users. So this came as somewhat of a shock to me, maybe not to Professor Coleman, but certainly to me, that this amount of time was being devoted to this single technology, not counting all the others. Okay, so now let's look at text messaging separate. And so there again, we see some significant amounts of time being devoted to text messaging. And so, 1 to 2 hours a day, you see the figure, 2 to 4 hours a day, more than 4 hours a day, so on and so forth. So a lot of time and energy is going into some of these products. Now, let me move that up for you. This appears to be congruent with other research that we've come across, where we do see, the next crop of teenagers becoming college students in the near future. It ends up text messaging quite a bit during the day. And some recent research, I've been told, has come along recently where that number has increased from 80 to above 100 text messages. what we did is we then tried to look at all the different products that we asked about in terms of usage and tried to come up with an average, so to speak. In other words, what does this sum up to be? And so here you can see from the slide that this still does not include email or talking on the phone. But now you're seeing that about 16% are using this technology that would be the equivalent of a full-time job. In addition, the overall average for all 4 colleges was that just in terms of using the electronic media is the equivalent of a half-time job. Okay? Now, let's look at self-reported positive outcomes. Now, keep in mind this is a questionnaire. We are not standing behind someone looking over their shoulder and seeing how they're indicating their responses. They're taking this online, and they're sharing with us anything they want about positive outcomes, okay? And so 43% said that it does have a positive aspect when it comes to relieving stress, which is associated with a number of factors, okay? And that appeared to be in line with what we saw on another question that indicated, why do you use the product to begin with? And so you can see that in terms of all products, over 70% are saying that it's for socializing. We see 72% of those who specifically mentioned YouTube are saying, hey, it's for fun and entertainment purposes. So obviously, those kinds of effects would moderate stress. I'm going to come back to this, though. In some other self-reported positive outcomes, there you see the figure, 35% report something to do with their social outcomes, their relationships they're having with other people, that they're actually increasing, being fostered and nurtured using some of this technology. So that was regarded as a positive thing. This next area I want you to take a look at. We're uncertain. This is one of those cases where we wished we had had a follow-up question that said, what are you referring to? So granted, it's 1 out of 10. But whatever the harmful and destructive activities are, this is something that maybe in the next few days you can begin to have a dialogue with each other and kind of unpackage that for us, because we're not entirely sure what is being referred to by that figure. Here are some quotes. So these are, I'm just lifting these from the roughly 25 pages of text that we received of potential positive outcomes that arise from the technology. And so you see here, individuals can use it as a way to save money. In this case, it's a way to be able to keep in better communication with other people. It doesn't matter if those other people are busy. Doesn't matter if they live on another continent. It's a way to keep connected. In terms of additional positive outcomes, this is another way where we can enrich relationships by contacting or being connected with friends. This one is representative of a lot of qualitative data that came up. So there are individuals out there who don't feel completely comfortable in social situations. They may not have the social skills that they're confident in to be able to feel comfortable, feel good in a large group. And so in this case, this kind of digital technology affords them the ability to be able to interact with others and yet not experience some of the emotional consequences of that. Let's now look at the other side of the coin. Again, these are self-reported. These are things that you Others told us. But we had a question specifically that addressed this. What kinds of areas might be neglected? Do you feel that you're neglecting other areas? I mean, keep in mind, since you're the first generation that has access to some of these technologies, and you're spending apparently significant amounts of time using it, what is it pushing out? Behaviors don't exist in a vacuum. Something is getting compromised. But just in terms of response to that question, over half of you reported that that was a negative consequence associated with this. Let's look at guilt and anxiety. And so there's the exact wording of the question that we used in the survey. So in terms of this, we see that again, over half of you have experienced guilt or anxiety, and we're in agreement with that statement using this technology. And there's another quote at the bottom that kind of indicates just someone expressing to an open-ended question some of the consequences. Here's some additional data that we captured, and again, the reason that that is being placed on the screen is because it's representative. I could have pulled out dozens and dozens of quotes that were essentially saying the same thing. Okay. Here's another one where individuals are talking about the difficulty of using the technology in social networking and some of the problems that can arise because it's a very different type of interaction than a face-to-face interaction. So one thing that your generation has had to try to deal with, and I think something that needs maybe a little bit more dialogue, is what is the difference between your online and offline relationships? And here are other situations where the technology perhaps, at least this woman is hinting that maybe it's becoming a little bit consuming. Maybe some of you out there right now are checking your iPhone or checking some of these things, and you just kind of feel that need that, hey, I've got to keep on top of this stuff. I've got to respond. If someone tries to communicate with me, I have to respond now. All right. Okay, in looking at some additional negative outcomes, in terms of reducing the face-to-face interactions, we found that at least over a third said that it did significantly impact that. And so that's a high enough percentage, I think it's worth a dialogue. I think it's worth a conversation to talk about how might we be able to take measures that correct that. Okay. This was not the focus of our particular survey. So we just had a single question regarding it, just so that you, in case you were thinking about how much this might be a problem for individuals, that's what the data shows across the 4 Christian colleges. And one thing that I just wanted to highlight here is that don't automatically classify it as perhaps just exclusively a male problem, as there's evidence, at least in 1 out of 5, where females are going to have some difficulty with that. In looking at some gender differences, we see that social networking tends to be more of a problem or issue with the females. You knew that, I'm sure, but now we've got data that actually backs it up. And that many of you, particularly the women, know that the gaming is a real issue with the men, okay? Now I would like to turn this over to Professor Coleman, who is going to be talking about some of the implications of the data that we just saw.
Professor Auday will be coming back to show some more information in a few minutes, but I'd like to start off with recognizing the importance for you as individuals and us as a community to ask the question, so what? Why is it important that you listen to this information and look at your lives? For me to look at my life, I have a Facebook account. How are we using our time? So I do hope in the next few days we have ongoing dialogue. There are several benefits, as has been pointed out, with having advanced technology available to us. Academically, you have massive numbers of resources available to you. You can ask almost any question. The problem is you can get as many answers, and a lot of them aren't accurate, but you can ask them. However, today we want to take a closer look at the implications of spending excessive amounts of time on electronic devices. Devices that have great potential for communication also could be a parasite that drains your time, your energy, and your skill set. Spending time gaming, social networking, texting, watching YouTube, and so forth can actually have a snowballing effect. You know that you will be looking at something on YouTube. I did this the other day. I was listening to a barbershop quartet that someone sent me, and then you have all these others that show up that would be fun to see as well, called snowballing. Suddenly your time is gone and you haven't even been aware of it. But some of you, many of you said you neglect important areas of your life. These two are inextricably connected and often result from spending too much time here and neglecting other areas in guilt and anxiety. When, because of these activities, you find yourself falling behind in your work, or your work is being done to less of a potential than you were capable of. I heard some professors talking about that the other day, that their cohort of bright students aren't producing to the level that they expected. Or if you graduate without being as prepared as you could be in your chosen career, then you will personally and will society be impacted by that. One notable impact of reading text messages and other short sound bites is that you grow impatient when required to read long instructions, or you have to read scholarly material. Your tendency is probably to skim that material and therefore not gain an accurate picture of what you're being asked to do or about what's being reported. This obviously can impact your grades as well as your understanding of complex theories and philosophies. If your engagement in electronic activities means that you're not eating properly, some of you tell me that you stay up all hours of the night, if you're not getting enough sleep or exercise, if you're not engaging in face-to-face communication, you will quite likely feel out of balance, unwell, stressed, and anxious. The implications of stress and anxiety and guilt on the total person are significant and include your mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Anxiety is often based on some unclear sense of dis-ease or fear. It can affect not only the way you think, but also affect your health. And some common symptoms are excessive, ongoing worry and tension, restlessness or feeling of being edgy, irritability, muscle tension, headaches, difficulty concentrating, nausea, tiredness, trouble falling or staying asleep, and being easily startled. I don't know if any of you experience any of those, but I would assume you probably do. On the other hand, guilt most generally arises when you experience conflict at having done something you shouldn't have done, or, as many of you indicated, you're not doing things that you know you should do. The latter directs connectly with those of you who reported that you're neglecting important responsibilities. A common side effect of guilt is depression. I could give you numbers of examples, but our time doesn't allow for that. Depression impacts so many areas of your life, and we want you to be alert to that. We do applaud the benefits of having quick communication with family members and friends far and near in the midst of very busy schedules through social networking. However, we do have questions regarding how well the skill set used within electronic community translates into your face-to-face interactions with other people. The results of not having the proper skills are notable. I've had students speak about the fact that some of you have asked them to be on Facebook, and yet when they run into you in lane, you don't even speak to them. That sort of disconnect causes a lot of pain. It causes hurt. And without the proper skill set of knowing how to reach out and say, I guess we had a conflict over this, let's talk about it. For you to recognize that when you're multitasking and I'm coming to you because I'm discouraged or I'm concerned and you're still texting or you're watching YouTube or you're doing something else at that time, you leave me feeling like I'm not important. So there are many difficult aspects of life that cannot be dealt with on social networking devices. Excessive use of electronic devices has important implications for work settings, for marriages, and society at large. There are a lot of wasted hours for the employer. There are feelings of being ignored or not being as important as the network friends when the spouse says, oh, I'm not going to go to bed right now, I want to connect on Facebook for a while, and the other spouse is ready to go to bed. And feelings of neglect and loneliness of people in our society. In fact, the cycle of loneliness feeds into the very use of social networking. Isolating yourself with technology negatively impacts your ability to build healthy relationships. Emoticons are fun, but they can't substitute for face-to-face interactions. Professor Auday's next slides demonstrate some of what you students reported regarding the connection between overuse and possible addictive behaviors.
How difficult is it to get away from it? Some of you have been experiencing that lately because of the challenge. But this is a question that we wanted to put on this survey. In other words, to what degree can someone terminate their involvement, their social networking, or electronic usage behaviors? So we asked that. And we had this particular question, and 1 out of 5 agreed with it. So that at least gave us some information that, okay, it's not 1%, it's not 5%, it's a fairly substantial degree of individuals who are finding it difficult terminating from using it. So this led into to what degree or to what percentage might some of you actually say that you think you're addicted to using the technology. And so what we did is, as you can see, this is the language that we used. We kind of defined what an addiction was. There it is. And we found that 12.3% were in agreement with the statement. And a fairly high number was unsure. And so this is 1 out of 5 couldn't say no to that question. And it's a fairly straightforward question. Do you feel that you're addicted? So this at least, this is significant really on 2 accounts. For one, we find that for substance abuse problems, for example, on college campuses, at any one point in time, you're looking at maybe 6 to 9% of you struggling with drinking or other behaviors like that. And we have services, and we provide support groups, and we provide an environment that tries to help you cope with some of those issues. Here, we're looking at percentages that are much larger than that, and yet we don't necessarily today see any wide-scale attempt to be able to address these issues. Second thing is the addiction literature itself typically indicates that if someone does If someone is behaving in an addictive pattern, they typically deny it. So if anything, these statistics that we collected, which were self-reported, are most likely depressed from what they should be. So they're actually conservative numbers. Okay. We also asked a question about, to what degree has this technology been in conflict with your Christian values? Now, we didn't define Christian values, so we left that open-ended. And that would demand, I think, some further unpackaging on your part to discuss, what is going on here. But you can see the numbers. Significant numbers of people have felt that what they have done on the internet, or that the behaviors associated with the electronic products, is in some way creating some conflict there. All right, I'm just going to cover a few more slides, and then I'm going to turn it back to Professor Coleman, given our time. We have a lot more data to report, but we just needed to be able to present just a little of it. What we did here was we just zeroed in on those who self-reported they felt they were addicted. So within just that group, we find out that on other measures, if you go back to see how they answered the question about neglecting important areas, you see that all of a sudden the percentages jump up to 67, nearly 66%. When it comes to the conflict with Christian values, you see that those who thought they were addicted all of a sudden are reporting that at twice the rate than the rest of us. Another statistic, just to be able to try to make more sense out of, is that of those who reported anxiety and guilt, which was over half of you, just under half of those reported that there was no conflict with their Christian values. And so that we don't fully comprehend, we don't fully make sense out of in terms of why you would have the experience of guilt and anxiety, but then not say that it has some impact on your Christian life as well. Sybil Coleman is going to return and talk more about the implications of the data you just saw. Okay.
I'm trying to see that clock there. My watch stopped. Julie, help me. I have 4 minutes. I'm going to almost forget my notes and just talk to you in a second. But I want to mention the fact that addiction grows out of an experience that felt good. And it grows from a once-in-a-while thing to something that you do more and you need more of to fulfill the needs within you, to the point that eventually it gets to control you. You can't stop regardless of its consequences. That's just a very simple definition. You may experience anything from frustration and disappointment in yourself to clinical depression when you are addicted to something. Your eating and sleep disorders can lead to serious illnesses. Poor academic performance, loss of money, loss of friends can also lead to notable feelings of isolation in the midst of hundreds of friends that you might have on Facebook. It is important to realize that the stress and anxiety can exacerbate other forms of addictive tendencies. Some of you reported that it actually using these devices helps you to feel less stress and more relaxed. And so that does speak to the fact that we need to do more research on it. Recognize the fact that the web itself can be a trigger to addictive behaviors. Our society makes us want quick gratification, and that's exactly what the web does. So we need to be alert to the fact that we can be actually increasing our problems. I want to help you to recognize that we've talked about the physical, emotional, and psychological dynamics, but you can't be a well-balanced person unless you're also looking at the spiritual dynamics of your life. So we wonder if, in fact, some of the spiritual disciplines, of Bible reading, of prayer time, of going to services, if that time is being reduced because of your use with electronic devices. For me personally, that raises a huge question. You are at the age that we call college space. You are at the time when the Holy Spirit prompts your heart to be concerned for social needs, to be concerned about justice and well-being, for you to be looking at what in your life you might be called to. I have a huge concern that if you go through these college years and you haven't taken time to increase your spiritual time with the Lord, to give your life to Him with an open hand, that you may end up graduating and have missed the very calling that He has for you in your life. What a sad comment that would be on society and for you as well. I believe that as a Christian community, and I know Professor Auday agrees, that as Christians, you can have a worldview that is amazingly instructive to society. If you look at the Hebrew tribe, the Issachar tribe, they were commended because they understood their times and they knew what to tell Israel to do. I believe that you can not look at electronic devices as good or bad, but look at them as to how can they be used to increase the Christian community's influence for good in society. May you not run away from your call and the responsibilities to do that. Martin Buber talks about the fact that there's an I-it piece. Another concern I have is if you're spending so much time on electronic devices, you're probably not spending as healthy a time with individuals. And I could, for instance, I have in my syllabus my email address. I could tell my students, email me, and we would have good contact back and forth, maybe good information, but don't come to my office, don't ask me anything personally. But silicon at that point becomes a mask. We no longer are meeting heart to heart, soul to soul. Iron is no longer challenging and sharpening iron. So our call for you is that we realize that Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, and other sites can be obsolete within the next few years. There are 2 sites right now where you can commit suicide to your Facebook. One's in Japan, one's in this country. Facebook is having a little trouble with that. So our call to you, the first generation to experience this explosion of new technology, is to become the voice for the next generation and for the generation that's older than you. That you'll have a voice that recognizes the benefits and pitfalls. That you will balance, you will give a model of balance and responsible use of technology, no matter how many apps it does have or it does not have. And we thank you. God bless you.